So I'm gonna be doing a series about if it's worth breeding in 2026 or if you should just stay a pet owner. So this is gonna come biased because obviously I've been breeding for, I don't know, better part of a decade, maybe 12, 13 years or something like that. And I now am not gonna be able to breed. Now, with all of this that I've gone through and everything that I've gone through in the last 13, 12, I don't know, it's probably been, I don't know how long it's been. So technically I started breeding in 2011, but then I also took a gap of like 2 years and some change. So technically it's not exactly 14 years, it's like 13, 15, or 13, 12, something like that. I was about to go on 15 years because 2026, right? Since I started. But I'm not, as we all know. The problem is, should you actually consider breeding in 2026? Now, this is something that most people will say, well, of course you should consider breeding. This is coming from a breeder or someone who bred not for a living as a hobbyist. Now, the thing about all this is, obviously, I got into boas and hognoses way after I got into everything. And I got into ball pythons way after bearded dragons. So the thing about me saying, is it worth breeding? I'm gonna break it down into 4 different videos because I have 4 different species. So therefore, you guys are about to get a series. I told you guys I wasn't gonna be done making YouTube videos. I just needed a break. I needed to process everything. I needed to work on selling everything. So therefore, that's what happened. That's what I did. And I'm back, baby. So this first video is gonna be on bearded dragons. So this is my bread and butter. This is what I've done for the longest amount of time. This is what I prefer. I've never not had bearded dragons except for those 2 years and some change where I was trying to raise my first child, also moving and everything. So I just didn't have anything. So this now is going to be technically, aside from that time, this will be the first time where I am not going to be breeding bearded dragons again. So yeah. So technically the second time I'm not breeding bearded dragons. But with that said, bearded dragons are amazing pets. They are the best pets. With that comes a lot of other people thinking that they should breed them and make money. And I've never, and I will tell you this, I've told you this many times, never get into something like this thinking you're gonna make money. Because while you can make money, it also costs a whole lot of money to keep it afloat and also get started. So is it worth breeding in 2026? Let's break it down. So everybody's asleep right now. So the videos that you guys are gonna see are actually gonna be B-roll for me shooting after the fact because everybody's asleep right now. They'll probably wake up here in about 45 minutes. So then after that, I'll be able to do some B-roll on them and put them in the photo box and everything so you can see exactly what I have. Now, exactly what I'm keeping too, so that's important. I still have 6 bearded dragons left for sale that I decided to sell last minute. So if you guys are looking for bearded dragons, go on Morph Market right now. Everything's half off. Sometimes I forget to reactivate the sale, so it goes back to normal price. Everything's half off. So please go over there, get yourself a beautiful bearded dragons for half off, coming from someone that's been breeding since 2011. And also, let's get into it. So breeding bearded dragons. And now I will break it down because at the end of the day, you could say you've made so much money off breeding bearded dragons, but how much did it actually cost you to raise these bearded dragons? First things first, most people will not breed their own food. So the dubia roaches, the mealworms, all that stuff, most people will not breed that. Most people will just buy that. If you decide to breed it, obviously you save money, but then you also have to worry about the startup cost. I have made videos on breeding dubia roaches. And I also tried making a series on superworms, but my superworm farm did not turn out whatsoever. So it just died out and I just called that a wrap. That was it. So dubia roaches, pretty strong. I have 4 colonies now. I should have 5 colonies, but I haven't really separated them. I haven't really had a whole lot of time. So therefore, I have 4 colonies that are overgrown. But hey, that works really good because for this ever since the breeding season started for me, I've only had to spend money on dubia roaches twice for the babies. And then after that, I just decided to look at my colonies because I was really not touching my colonies at that time. So I decided to look at the colonies, and the colonies were producing like crazy. So that's what I started doing. So if you are breeding, I do consider that you breed also the food because you save money in the long run. But the startup cost is astronomical because at the end of the day, I probably spent maybe $1,000 on 4 dubia colonies. And that sounds like a lot of money, but at the end of the day, also, every season I was spending probably like $10,000 on feeding costs. So if that can save me at least half off the feeding costs, $1,000 is worth it. So, and it has so far. So I'm pretty happy with it so far. But obviously this year was none like any other year. So therefore, I don't really have a way to tell you if it would actually save me a whole lot of money. But I know for sure it would have saved me at least $1,000, if not more. So in that aspect, it was worth it. So the thing is, if you decide to breed bearded dragons and you don't decide to breed your food, essentially now all of the expenses that come from feeding bearded dragons will eat up all of the profits from breeding bearded dragons. So this is one thing that I said in the past. A bearded dragon on average sells for about $150 or so. Right now, that is not the case. If you are breeding regular bearded dragons, not bearded dragons that are $1,000, this is like normal pet ownership bearded dragons. If you breed those bearded dragons, they are not selling. They are sitting, and they continue to sit, and they will continue to sit at that price point. There is a fine point between a pet owner and a breeder, and the pet owners usually stay around $150, $100. Some of them will go up a little higher because they don't care to pay more for something that looks better. So that's the other caveat there. Versus a breeder is looking specifically for genetics and specifically for coloration. You cannot mix both. There will not be a time where you can breed for breeders and also for pets. Because, for example, let's say I'm breeding for Wiblets. Wiblets are beautiful dragons. If you can get color in them, they'll turn out even better. If you're breeding for Wiblets, Wiblets usually sell for about $400, $500. However, the people that are buying those Wiblets are not typical pet owners. It's people that want higher end bearded dragons that are willing to spend that, which is very slim, and breeders. So at the end of the day, that $500 dragon might take longer to sell than that $150 dragon or that $100 dragon, but you have to sell 5 of those $100 dragons to sell 1 Wiblets. So that means you have to do 5 times the amount of expenses to sell the 1 Wiblets. So it depends on what you want. Do you want online sales mainly? Do you want local sales mainly? Do you want to go to reptile expos? What do you want? And how, that'll determine what you're going to get. However, I shall say this as well. Out of that Wiblets clutch, you will also find that you will have $100 dragons and $150 dragons. The question is, will they sell? And the reason I say this is because more than likely those $100 dragons and those $150 dragons are going to look pretty bland because they're coming from het to het parents. And although you, like I said, if you get color in them, then it's a completely different story. But for the most part, it's hard to get color into bearded dragons when you, especially, for example, this male here, I'll show you a picture of him. This male here is a pretty nice colored Wiblets. I've had many colored Wiblets in the past, but every time you breed them, depending on what you breed them to, you can lose that color, you can gain more color. And for me, I prefer yellow, so I go for yellow. And yellow takes a lot longer to show up in the Wiblets than red takes to show up in a Wiblets. And red just never shows up in the Wiblets. It eventually just turns orange, which people like either way. So I was trying to, at this point, not going to happen now, I was trying to go towards yellow Wiblets. And so I was breeding Wiblets to yellow dragons. I was also trying to stay on the colored orange colored side, so I was breeding them to red dragons too, just to get that going. But obviously it didn't pan out. So in those types of clutches, zeros, Wiblets, weros even, you will produce breeder dragons and you will produce pet dragons. The problem is most people, the pet dragons, they sell them for more because of the possibility that they're het Wiblets, the possibility that they're het zero, the possibility that they're het wero. So they put a little bit more on the price tag, which guess what? The pet owner does not care for. So they would rather spend money somewhere else for $100 than your $150, $200 just because of the possibilities of genetics. even though the $100 dragon might be more colorful than the $150, $200 dragon, just because you think it's valued more because of the possibility of genetics. And again, they don't care about that. They want looks. And more than likely, they can get a translucent dragon that's a leatherback for $100, $150. And that looks a lot better than a normal dragon that's het for wiblets, het for hypo, het for trans, het for zero, or possible het for any of those. Because of the possibility, more than likely they're just not going to go for it. So there is a fine point when you breed those clutches. You can't expect a lot of profit from the visuals, but that profit from the visual usually takes away from the non-nice dragons, I should say. So what I've always done is I'll go to Reptile Expos and I'll sell them for dirt cheap, because at the end of the day, those possible hets, that's just me anyways, most people don't do it like that. Those possible hets, you don't need them. The longer you keep them, the more it costs for you to feed them, the more it takes away from not just the profits of the normal dragons, but also the profits of the visual dragons. So at the end of the day, those wiblets are losing profit because you decide to keep the non-visual ones, the non-wiblets, for longer, just to make a little bit more money. So I always just go to the Reptile Expos and I'll put a price range, and somebody will say, hey, what price range is this one? And you tell them, and either they say no or yes. And then if they say no, it would be like, well, I could do this. And at the end of the day, you want to make the sale. We're all salespeople. If you want to breed bearded dragons, you have to get out of your shell. You have to not be shy. You have to try to sell, because at the end of the day, that's what you're doing, right? Now, here recently, when I started selling everything off, in my experience, in all of the years that I've done this, when you post adult bearded dragons, they sell so quick, no one even has a chance, except for the first person that wanted them, to get the bearded dragons. So now, for some reason, it's the opposite. They sit and 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 they sit, because there's a lot of people that have noticed that bearded dragons aren't selling. So why would they decide to breed? And these 6 bearded dragons that I still have left, I have had them for half off for 2 weeks now. 2 weeks, 50% off. They're not selling. So it is also a bad time of year. We're about to get into the holiday season. Nobody's spending money. So it's also bad timing for me on that part. But those are all things that make you have a decision on if you want to breed in 2026. So do you want to breed and possibly have dragons sit and sit and sit because it's just bad timing, because the season's not right, because people aren't really spending money on pets right now? There's a lot that goes into your decision to breed in 2026. So now let's get back to all the expenses and all the costs and everything. So on average, $150. On average, how much does it cost to feed a bearded dragon if you are not buying feeders? So you could say for a regular situation, you probably can see $50 expense on every bearded dragon that you're selling, which also, this is another reason why I tell everyone, never breed normal bearded dragons, because a normal bearded dragon is only going to produce more normal bearded dragons, and normal bearded dragons are like $25 to $50 at the Reptile Expos. Not worth it. At the end of the day, you're losing money or you're breaking even. Like I said, not worth it. So if you're feeding dubia roaches, if you're feeding quality insects, quality feeders, you will be looking at probably like $35 to $50 or so per bearded dragon. And that is normal. So therefore, if you're selling a bearded dragon for $150, your profit's $100. That is $50, $35 to $50 on average if you're waiting till that 2-month mark to sell your bearded dragons, or if you're waiting till that they're about 10 grams or so. And that's usually what I do. I don't care too much about age. I care more about the size of the bearded dragon. So 10 grams or so is when I decide to sell them for shipping purposes. Local, I usually wait till they're about 6 grams, which is about 2 or 3 times bigger than when they hatched. So that means they are growing. And that could usually be about a month and a half or so in time frame. So 6 weeks to 8 weeks essentially is what you're going to be waiting to before you can sell these bearded dragons. So therefore, if you're waiting 6 weeks, your cost is not going to be the same as if you're waiting 8 weeks. So you got to take all that into consideration. Now, the thing about you making that $100 profit, right? And that is the perfect scenario. You have 20 bearded dragons. They all hit 2 months at the exact same time, because every clutch on average is 20 bearded dragons. So you have 20, they all get to 2 months at the exact same time. You have 20 times, let's say $100. You got $2,000 in that clutch right there. And then you have 20 by 500 or by $50. So you have, I don't even know. Is that yeah, $1,000. I don't know why I couldn't do that a month. So $1,000 in expenses before you can even sell the bearded dragon. So that is another question you should ask yourself. Do you have enough funds to start up? Do you have enough funds to maintain before you can sell? So we're only talking about breeding right now. We're not even talking about the first aspect of breeding, which I'll get to. So now you've already lost $1,000 before you've even made the $2,000. $1,000 profit sounds pretty good, especially since bearded dragons can lay on average 3 clutches. So that means you can make $3,000, not just $1,000 off profit. So now that you've made your first $3,000 of profit, let's back it up all the way to the beginning when you decided to buy bearded dragons. Those $150 dragons are not going to come from normal bearded dragons. You're not going to be able to spend $200 on bearded dragons and get $150 dragons. That's just not going to work. Both dragons need to be of quality, so the babies that they produce on average are $150 because some of them may be cheaper, some of them may be more expensive. So the only way you can get that is by buying more expensive bearded dragons. On average, if you're buying an adult, just know that the price is going to be doubled. But if you're buying a baby, growing it up, on average, you can see probably $200 per adult or per baby to produce those $150 babies. So if you're spending $400 on bearded dragons to produce $150, so you're spending $400 on bearded dragons eventually to produce and make a profit of $3,000. That looks like a really good return on investment. I agree. However, then you also have all of the supplies you have to buy. So let's say on supplies, you're looking at maybe $300 per dragon. So you're at $500 per dragon. That's $1,000 you just spent on dragon supplies and the dragons themselves. So $1,000 spent. Now, if you're buying babies, the babies, you have to wait till they're about 2 years or so to start breeding them. Some people wait less time. Some people wait more time. The people that wait less time usually is because they power feed their dragons to get them to wait as soon as possible because they only are doing it for profit. They don't care about the well-being of the bearded dragons. If your bearded dragons grow too fast, usually that's when they have problems and they don't live as long as they're supposed to. So that's something you have to consider there. So let's say you're waiting the 2 years on average. So 2 years of feeding them, 2 years of taking care of them, 2 years of vet visits if they get sick, 2 years of all of this stuff just so you can make. Now, remember, you spent $1,000 on these bearded dragons. You're losing $1,000 per clutch at the end of it when you're selling the bearded dragons. So now you're at $4,000 that you have to literally pay forward. So this is money you're going to lose no matter what you do out of the $6,000. So now it means your profit is $2,000. This is a typical situation, people. This is not something like I'm just making these numbers up. $2,000, right? That's not even including all of the costs and expenses of those 2 years that you're going to be keeping them. So we could probably say, you're going to spend $500 a year on feeding them and keeping them and taking care of them and all of that. So now that's another $1,000 you lost. So now your profit is only $1,000 from those 2 dragons that you decided to breed. Congratulations. And this is not to deter anyone. $1,000 profit sounds good to some people, and that's perfectly fine because $1,000 is money that you didn't have. So if you can have it, great. And if you can figure out a way to cost save, then that's even better. So breeding your own feeders. Now that's another $1,000 up front, but then at the end of it, that's $3,000 that you're not going to be spending on feeders. So if you decide to go that route, you do keep those $3,000, but you got to put in another $1,000. So now your profit is back down to $2,000, or back up, I guess I should say, to $2,000. So those are all things you could do essentially to keep the profits for longer. And then now your profits are $2,000. You can reinvest that and go for bigger situations later on, or bigger projects later on. That's perfectly fine. Most people, that's how they start. So if that's what you want, then that's what you do. Eventually, you will make a little bit more money. So eventually, let's say you are reinvesting that money and you decide now, well, my bearded dragon male is a really good breeder. I could probably introduce another female to him this season. Now you have 3 dragons and you have 2 different breeding females and you only had to buy 1 more dragon. So essentially, Now you have 3 dragons you have to take care of, but it's not the same cost, because now for that 1 dragon that you added, it's $1,000 total, because let's say $500 for the years of keeping them and $500 for buying them and setting them up. So that's $1,000 total that you have now into that season of breeding. So the first season that you decided to breed, if obviously it'll be like 2 years down the road, then at that point you have made your $2,000 profit. All of the expenses that you had from the startup, the feeders, the buying of the first dragons and all that, that's already been paid for. So that's $2,000 that you kept for yourself, minus the $1,000 that you are going to be reinvesting to put towards the next set of projects. The next year, $2,000 because you're growing up that first baby. The next year after that, $2,000 because you're growing up that next baby. So for 2 years, you made another $4,000. That was the total of that you made in those 2 years. So now you could continue to reinvest it, or that could just be money in your pocket, whatever the case may be. Now this is $4,000 in an entire year, or $4,000 in an entire 2 years. So that's about $1,000 every 6 months. That's not a lot of money. That's not a lot of money, but that's money you didn't have before. So this is how everybody gets started. Now, 2 years, no making of money, right? 2 years making money. The 4th year, or I guess it would be the 5th year essentially. No, it would be the 4th year. The 4th year, now you have that 3rd dragon that's ready to breed. So that's another 2 females that are breeding now, or another female that's breeding now. So at the end of the day, now it's double. So now your profits are, where was I? Now your profits are $4,000 that year. I can't even think right now. But actually, technically, you've probably been reinvesting your money. I'm not going to say you have, because some people don't, but you may have been reinvesting your money into more feeders. So your feeding costs could even be lower now, but let's just say it's the same. So it is $4,000 for that year. And you will always have to reinvest your money, because your dragons will get older, and that is something that happens, and they will eventually stop breeding. So I usually stop breeding the bearded dragons around 5 years, just because I want them to at least experience time where they are not breeding, because at the end of the day, they should be pets. They should be pets, okay? And these bearded dragons, they will probably not breed ever again, because by the time I decide to breed again, they may be too old and they will just be pets. And that's perfectly fine with me, because right now that's what I am. I'm a pet owner. I'm sorry. I'm a pet owner now. I'm not going to be buying bearded dragons anymore. I'm probably not going to be buying anything anymore, because I'm a pet owner now. So therefore, that is what it is. That's where we're at now. So the thing is, now, you're at the 5th year, and the total profit that you have made from breeding at 5 years down the road, this is going to be shocking to anyone. 5 years of breeding, 5 years of trying to be a bearded dragon breeder, you have only made, so 4,000 that 5th year, 2,000 the 4th year, 2,000, so you're already at 9,000 right there. And then the first year you actually bred, you decided to reinvest $1,000. So you're at $10,000. $10,000, people, for 5 years of trying to become a bearded dragon breeder. And that's usually how people get started. So is $10,000 in 5 years worth it to you? Is breeding in 2026 worth it to anyone? So that's the question you have to ask yourself. Are you breeding for money? If you're breeding for money, you might as well not be breeding, because you're not going to be making that much. You're not going to be making really any money. If you're breeding for the fun of it, I will say don't do it, because there is a lot more that goes into it that's not fun, like the bugs. Some people don't like bugs. Sometimes the babies don't make it. You have to think about that. Is that going to be fun for you? No. At first, that was like terrible for me. I would be like, oh no, like this baby didn't hatch, or it's hatched like deformed. At the beginning, I was just always so kind of like messed up about it, because I didn't want that baby to die. That's one thing that I didn't want. But I hate to say this, but after a while, you kind of become desensitized to it, and you just do it. You just say, all right, the baby didn't make it, freeze it, toss it. Sad. That is how it goes. I mean, after doing it for so long, that's just how it goes. Because every year, breeding 300-400 dragons, you're bound to lose a few of them. And This year I didn't lose any, Fortunately, I didn't lose any this year, but I only had about 100 dragons this year. So you probably, for every 100 dragons, you may lose 2. So, and sometimes you may lose more. It really just depends on your incubator. It depends on, you know, that's a lot that goes into if your babies are going to survive. So there's just a lot that goes into it. So if you're someone that is squeamish, you're someone that just gets real down, depressed about an animal dying, I would never suggest you that you breed anything, actually. So that is one thing I will say. So is breeding in 2026 worth it? That is an answer for you, because breeding bearded dragons is not as exciting as it used to be, because everyone's doing it now. It used to be that you go to the Reptile Expo, and you can still, it depends on where you live, you can still go to Reptile Expo and you might be the only one there. But before, you used to go to the Reptile Expos and people would not even know what a bearded dragon was, and that was so cool because you were able to explain it to them. But now everyone knows what a bearded dragon is, and everyone knows what they cost, and everyone knows what their value is. All of a sudden, everyone's an expert on bearded dragons, even though they don't own one, even though they don't breed one, because everyone knows what bearded dragons are. Their neighbor has a bearded dragon. Their cousin has a bearded dragon. That is enough for them. If their neighbor lets them play with their bearded dragon and they don't have to take care of it, perfect. If their cousin lets them play with their bearded dragon, they don't have to take care of it, perfect. So now you have lost customers because they don't really want to take care of something. They just want the fun of having the bearded dragon in their hands for 20 minutes. So with all that said, the decision is yours. Everything that I said, everything that I laid out is just my opinion. It's just my experience with this economy and the way things are going, with everyone deciding to be a bearded dragon breeder. So should you just be a pet owner, or should you be a breeder when it comes to bearded dragons? That is a question that you should be asking yourself thousands of times before you decide to even go that route. Owning bearded dragons is very satisfying. Breeding bearded dragons is also very satisfying. But both of these have their downfalls, because breeding, you lose money, you lose animals, you lose time, you lose a lot of time, you lose space because of the supplies you have to buy to breed these bearded dragons. And unfortunately, some people can't live with that. Some people can't live with loss of time. Some people can't live with loss of space. Some people can't live with the stress that comes with breeding bearded dragons. Some people just can't. And that is okay. I'm not saying that you're worse than other people. I'm just saying that it's okay. I'm saying that this is you. This is your life. You want to make sure that you are going to be happy with the decision that you make. So is owning bearded dragons the route for you? Who knows? If you made it this far into the video, don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss anything that I put out in the future. As always, peace.